Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we've got an extremely special YouTube video for you. Today, April 10th, 2025, is the first day in 35 years that this artifact has been back on board the battleship. So, without drawing this out any further, this handgun, which I'll be referring to as lucky number 7, is an original Battleship New Jersey handgun. Less than a third of a year ago, we put out a video saying that we had found the serial numbers of all of the small arms that were assigned to ship's company on the battleship. Ship's company means the Navy crew of the ship as opposed to the Marine detachment. We don't have the documentation for the Mardet weapons yet, but I'm pretty sure this one served with the Marine detachment on board too. We'll get to that in a second. But we put out a video saying that we'd found this documentation. We put out a video around January 1st that said that that was one of the things that we were looking to acquire this year. And we put out the serial numbers to you guys, and one of you helped us track down one of the 28 original 1980s era 1911s that was issued to Battleship New Jersey. So, we'll talk more about the provenance of this in a second. We're sitting here in the officer's wardroom, right behind the small arms locker where this handgun would have been stored between 1983 and 1990 when it was issued to Battleship New Jersey's crew. This was previously a 40mm magazine, but by the 1980s it was turned into a small arms locker. There's a fairly large safe in there that would have held many of the ship's small arms. And this is an original Battleship New Jersey, I don't know what you call it, a holster board for the ship's 1911s. This was found on board the ship when we received the ship, and these would have been distributed to the various safes around the vessel. In particular, take note of all the wear on this board, because it very much matches wear that's on the handgun here. This is not a safe queen, guys. This is not like a brand new, fully polished, well-finished thing. This thing is scratched and beat to heck and used like a rented mule, and you can tell that it was issued to a battleship for a decade. I've got some copies here of the documents that we found that relate to this handgun, and we've put in a Freedom of Information Act request for more info about this serial number. I'm not sure what we're going to find relating to this. The Navy's documentation isn't the greatest in the 1980s, and we haven't figured out when this was first built, where it might have been prior to it being issued to the battleship. And we've got some idea of where it gets issued after it leaves the battleship, but we're still firming that up. But let's look at the battleship details first. So this is a copy of the page for this particular handgun. There's one for every single small arm that was issued to Battleship New Jersey. So it says that it cost $162 back then. It says the ship's allowance is 28. It's got the pistol serial number on here, which is what we matched. And then the coolest thing, something we didn't mention in the previous video, in the top left corner, it says it's Weapons Department, card number 7. So when we first were able to pick up this gun and saw the 7 on the grip, the big question was that from its time on New Jersey, or was that from a different time in this handgun's very long career? But the fact that this says that it's card 7, it's got a 7 on both sides of the grips, tells me that that is from the battleship's time on, from its time on board the battleship. Now going through this, first date we have on this sign-off list is October 1984, weapons officer turnover. That's not when it was originally issued. I've got, here's the back of this page, and then here is the page, this page is just for the 1911s. This was the first page in the document. On March 1st, 1983, the ship receives 2 separate shipments of 1911s, one of 16 and one of 12. So that brings us up to our allotment of 28 of these handguns, which means that this one, number 7, is almost certainly one of those. Presumably it's part of that first shipment, but we'll track that down later. Continuing down here, you can see in 1988, 4 are transferred to Mardat in February, and then another 4 are transferred in October, 3 to Mardat, and 1 goes back to supply. I believe this is one of the ones transferred to Mardat, because if you go back to our page for this individual gun, it's got division officer turnover, blah, 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 blah. 29 October 1988, 29 October 1988, transferred to Mardat. So this is one of 3 of the second batch that's transferred to Mardat. Presumably this is while the ship is participating in the Australian bicentennial. So the Marines have a set number of these that they're issued. Ship's company has 28. The Marines are doing more of the security on board, so it seems like they transferred a bunch of the ship's company weapons to the Marines during this time. Interestingly, that's pretty much the last thing on here until it's transferred to Crane, Indiana, when it's transferred off the ship in 1990, August of 1990. But here we've got, here on the first sheet we've got that all of the remaining handguns are transferred off of the ship as she's preparing for decommissioning in July and August of 1990. So this spent about half of its time on board with ship's company, and then some of the remaining time on board with the Marine detachment. And then when the Marine detachment is stood down, presumably, as the ship is going through inactivation, remember August 1990, they're starting this process. By February of 91, they're finished and the ship is taken out of service. But she's sitting in a yard. Ship's company isn't doing the security anymore. It's the yard doing the security. So all of these end up transferred off of the ship. So we had these documents that told us about this. We put this information out there to you guys, and a gentleman named Andrew Stolinsky reached out to the museum and said that, hey, I do research on small arms. I specialize in the first half of the 20th century U.S. Marshall firearms, and I work for a company called the Archival Research Group. Can I look for one of these guns for you? So he reached out to a number of places, including the Civilian Marksmanship Program, which went through their files and found within like 2 weeks that they had one of our serial numbers, lucky number 7 here, on the shelf in their warehouse, and they were willing to transfer it over to the museum. Keep in mind, as a regular person, you can go through the steps and acquire World War II era firearms or older era firearms from the Civilian Marksmanship Program. You cannot ask them for specific serial numbers. And there is a fee for private individuals to acquire these guns. Really love the CMP. Highly suggest, if you haven't looked into it, that you do. But I'm glad that they made an exception for the museum as an institution and were willing to support us by looking up this specific serial number for us. And I'm hoping that we find more of our original firearms in the near future. So, without further ado, let's take a look at lucky number 7 itself. First off, lock the slide back so that everybody can see the firearm is empty. There is no magazine inserted, no round in the barrel. This gun came to us incredibly dry. I was kind of surprised. I was expecting to get the thing just like covered in cosmoline and have to do a real thorough cleaning of it before we could do anything with it. But it came to us incredibly dry, and so I oiled it up, especially a historic firearm like this, especially one with the level of wear that this one has. I want it to be very wet, and particularly the slide. So your average 1911 sounds like a baby rattle when you shake it like that. This one has a super tight-fitting slide on it. I've never seen a government handgun with a slide fit this tight before. I'm really impressed by that. Now, you might be able to tell that the handgun has like 2 different colors on it. So the frame and the slide do not have matching serial numbers. The frame, you can see, has that original like green-gray Parkerization on it. And the slide has a much darker black Parkerization on it. So the frame is a Colt, and the slide is made by DSE Inc. So at a certain point in the service life of this handgun, it got so much use and so much wear and tear that they end up trading out the original slide for this newer one that almost certainly has a tighter fit than that original. We've already pointed out the number 7 painted on the grips on both sides of the firearm. Oh, and just a reminder, handling firearms inside of a ship, this is a steel box. Always make sure that you clear the thing and that it's unloaded. That goes for always, but especially when you're inside a steel ship, where if this does go off, even though I'm being very diligent and pointing it away from myself, the camera people, that if this does go off, it will ricochet. So got to be careful with that. Now, something else to look at with this particular handgun, all of the wear. There's a little bit of wear back here on the checkering where your hand fits. There's a tremendous amount of wear on various parts that protrude. The sights have a lot of wear on the top. The Parkerization has been worn smooth, and the safety over here is worn off. So that's almost certainly from sliding into and out of various holsters. Remember this original Shipboard holster and all the wear on it. That this wear lines up with the safety over here, so that, and then of course the sights are going to be scraping up against this side and these bolts mounted there. So that has caused some wear, but just for this video, we're going to put the gun back inside the original ship holster board for probably the first time since August of 1990. That is an extremely tight fit. I suspect the leather has shrunk a little bit over the last 35 years. Also, the snap here really interferes with putting the gun in. So I suspect, very gently pull this back out. You see scrape marks around here that could very well be from that snap, or, you know, my 1911, I own a couple of these myself, have some scrape marks there from removing the pin here for when you're disassembling the gun. But yeah, this is an extremely well-worn firearm. All right, so why would, also worth pointing out that the handgun ships from the CMP in this nice case and comes with a magazine. This magazine looks very, very new, and I suspect this is new and off the shelf and not an original to this particular gun. But magazine slides in, magazine release here. So you get one 7-round magazine. Interestingly, from the documentation we found along with this handgun, even though most pistol magazine pouches are double cell pouches, and even though the 1911 holds a 7-round magazine, sailors were issued a 1911 and 2 7-round magazines, each loaded with 5 rounds. So given how worn out this pistol is, I bet you the magazines were also pretty worn out, and they were worried about the springs on them, so they're not issuing them fully loaded. In addition to the Pelican-style case and the magazine, and of course the handgun itself, this ships with a folder that has all the documentation in it, including the certificate of authenticity. It ships with a barrel flag, a lock, and a reprint of the 1964 manual for the 1911. Really cool set of things that the museum got alongside this artifact. So, why is Ship's company being issued these? That's all sorts of ship security reasons. During World War II, you'll remember we did a video about 3 months ago where we talked about the number of guns that were issued to the ship, and it was hundreds. There were like 200 1911s, like 300 rifles, all sorts of other stuff. By the 80s, it is 28 of these. That hundreds was for gunboat diplomacy, where you're going to be landing forces of combined sailors and Marines. But by the 1980s, you're likely not doing this. This is purely for the ship's Master-at-Arms force, which is like the police force on board the vessel. Keep in mind that only capital ships, and often only ships with nuclear weapons, have Marine detachments on board by the 1980s. And so not all ships have Marines for doing that. So there is a force of sailors, a detachment of sailors that are going to be armed with small arms and doing those like police type duties on board the vessel. Usually gunner's mates as a rating. So things like the shore patrol guys going ashore, things like the guys who are guarding the gangway on quarterdeck watch when the ship is in port, they are going to be the types of folks who are issued these sorts of handguns. And then, of course, it is transferred to the Marine Detachment for the last couple of years of the ship's service. And the Marine Detachment will also use it for those sorts of things. They stand guard over nuclear weapons, classified spaces, the captain's cabin, things like that. And they can also be used as landing forces, whether we're just landing a spotting party for the ship's main guns, or if we're doing some of that old world gunboat diplomacy type stuff. You might also see these issued to detachments that are leaving the ship, such as aviation detachment pilots and crew might be issued these as well, for while they're in the air. If they're shot down, they end up being over enemy territory. Now that we have Lucky Number 7 back on board, or her actual name, serial number 1136489, I like Lucky 7 better, but now that we've got her back on board, we can really start the deep dive research into this particular firearms history and expect more content on that in the future. And hopefully, this one took us 4 months to track down and acquire for the museum. Hopefully, over the next couple of years, we will be able to track down more of the ship's original firearms, bring them back on board, and research those as well. So, stand by for that. My question for you at the end of this video: would you take this firearm out shooting? It is an original artifact to the ship. You don't want to use it consumptively. However, 1911 is an extremely robust artifact, and it's there are many of them over 100 years old that are still being shot, and there's spare parts out there for it. There are experts in how to maintain it out there. I'm by no means one, but I do own at least 3 of these myself, in addition to some of my coworkers who are also guns people. So, do you think the museum should take it shooting, or leave it in the case? Let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. It was one of you guys that helped us track this down. Now help us track down the other 27. You can also support us by donating at the link down below, and by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum and our channel. Thanks for watching.